I think he's very lonely. Lonelier than he lets on. Maybe lonelier than he even realizes.
Have you spoken to him about this?
Briefly, and he agreed that...
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm a little confused here. What are you suggesting?
That he come here and stay in my room.
Are you out of your mind?
Along with Quentin Tarantino and Tim Burton, Wes Anderson is arguably one of the most instantly recognizable cinematic auteurs by general audiences. His movies stand on that increasingly disappearing middle ground between independent film and blockbusters. Mid-budget but star-studded affairs, not sold to audiences based on prior intellectual property or brand recognition, but rather on the strength of the film itself. This has, for the most part, delivered satisfying box office results and consistent critical acclaim. Justice for Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Unless, of course, one considers the Wes Anderson name a brand in and of itself, in a similar way in which a lot of people would understand Tim Burton or Quentin Tarantino as brands, as a promise of familiar, recognizable content. There is definitely a case to be made there, especially recently. You may have seen while browsing TikTok, for example, or if you're an old like me who doesn't use TikTok, through links that your friends sent you because you're their film friend, a recent fad of Wes Anderson-inspired videos. These usually begin with a prompt along the lines of, "You better not be romanticizing your life by pretending you're in a Wes Anderson movie when I get there," after which, they proceed to imitate the eccentric filmmaker's style in framing their surroundings and themselves with obituary from the French Dispatch soundtrack playing in the background, in a sort of slice-of-life vignette. Of course, these are all seconds-long videos, which means that despite the TikToker in question pretending they are in a Wes Anderson movie, the similarities with his filmography are mostly going to be aesthetic, not narrative. However, a lot of them are still frankly impressive given the lack of control over their surroundings, and they still get shared around and validated as Wes Anderson pastiches. And again, in the surface, they are. Gwyneth, I'm doing you so dirty. I'm so sorry, Goop. Please don't hate me. Similarly, although this time around devoid of any kind of creativity or artistry whatsoever, you have the tedious "what if Wes Anderson made X property" trend, which uses AI-generated imagery to supposedly show what popular franchises such as Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings would look like directed by Anderson. They are all absolutely hideous, having first gone viral in earnest thanks to who else? Locals, and then rightfully dragged by film Twitter for reasons that are to be discussed here later. And it's worth noting that very few directors' work would lend itself to this kind of prompt. If you asked an AI to imagine, say, Martin Scorsese's Ant-Man Quantumania, the result would most likely be Ant-Man surrounded by mobsters, even though that would have nothing to do with The Aviator, Silence, or After Hours. So all this recent focus on Wes Anderson's aesthetics and, at very superficial capacities, have reminded me of a discourse of sorts that pops up whenever a new movie of his comes out, and which is already in full swing as Asteroid City makes its debut. Some very different and very unique individuals will claim that Wes Anderson is yet another white male director, imposing obnoxious, repetitive aesthetics onto his audience, for no reason whatsoever other than to show off his quirkiness and earn acclaim for being an auteur. He's all style and no substance. While provocative, people of good taste, or at least some degree of media literacy, might recognize this statement as first, lazy, and second, false. And I have gathered you all here today to take a look at why.
So, first in the order of the day, what does Wes Anderson look like? Oh, that's lovely, but not what I meant. Title cards. Pastels. Symmetry. Staring right at the camera. Snap zooms. French terminology.
Avant-garde. Laissez-faire. Connoisseur. Joie de vivre. Mise en scène.
Quaint city life.
Dogs. Holding objects up for the camera.
Nulling. Trains, which I love, obviously. And miniatures. I'm sorry for subjecting you all to my handwriting. Are you all gonna get that I'm Max Fisher from Rushmore? I don't know if I'm communicating it properly. I think it's the hair. I was actually gonna wear a pin from my actual high school, but then I realized that I'd rather die. Now, that's all certainly true to the Wes Anderson vision, but isn't it more of a surface level look at the aesthetics rather than a comprehensive analysis of his style? Those AI-generated mock-ups of Wes Anderson-directed franchises are perfect encapsulations of that, since it's all just regurgitating surface-level interpretations of the visuals. I mean, this just looks like they repainted the Overlook Hotel in all pastels.
You have destroyed his spirit. You have taken him from us. All that I could forgive. But, Debbie... What? Pastels?
If we are defining his style based on symmetry, coordinated color palettes, and vintage clothing, what exactly about The Shining as is be different from actual Wes Anderson movies? I would even venture to say that should we delve deeper into the world of Wes Anderson, we would find that the true signifiers of his style are not these eccentric visual cues that everyone takes at face value, but rather the way in which his characters relate to each other. It's not like every single shot in his movies has the immaculate symmetry or the fully controlled environments that so many people have come to associate with him. Most aspects of those homages and parodies, such as the symmetry and limited depth, seem to have slowly come to be rather than having been there from the very start. They are certainly more reminiscent of his more recent films. Part of that is most likely due to an increasing access to budget thanks to his growing status, meaning that he has had the resources to more closely adhere to his vision. Regardless, his early lower budget movies still managed to feel undoubtedly his. The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou is arguably one of the most imitated movies aesthetically when referencing Anderson, and those visuals certainly communicate that whimsical charm and borderline fantastical silliness that so many seem to associate with him. But if you've seen the movie, then you know that the mood is rather grim, wistful, and lonely. A man's reluctant journey towards that spiritual fulfillment that has been eluding him for decades. He has yet to find it romantically or professionally, but it might just be in the fatherhood he's been running from forever.
Why didn't you contact me?
Because I hate fathers and I never wanted to be one.
It's not that far from the visually much more grounded Darjeeling Limited. Three brothers travel halfway across the world, expecting enlightened India and the religious mother. Bogota needs to outlaw motorcycles after they outlaw cars. Where three brothers travel halfway across the world expecting enlightened India and the religious mother to provide closure over the death of their father. A closure that neither could provide. It had to come from each other. So really it's his characters, his protagonists, who have maintained that thorough line from Bottle Rocket all the way to the French Dispatch. That is where the style and the substance both lie. I talk so much about solitude in this channel. It's fine. So, we've gone over what characterizes Wes Anderson's visual style, but what exactly constitutes one of his protagonists? Is there some kind of consistent template that we can look for? In terms of the broad strokes, they tend to be intellectual, dignified, discerning, witty, and charming, often awkwardly so. And, should they lack any of these qualities, they are probably trying to develop them or even just fake them. Max Fisher, Steve Zissou, Mr. Fox, and his son Ash are all trying to reach some sort of cultural status they feel they deserve, and their whole journey is about them finding their place in this world they aspire to make a part of, to fill in the shoes of some grandeur they expect to live up to.
What's wrong with you?
Let me think about that. I'll tell you the next time I see you.
Sure, tell me then.
As a result, beyond the wit and culture, his protagonists tend to be pensive, melancholic, and, above all, lonely. After all, this frustratingly aspirational facade and perpetual search for meaning inevitably lead to dissatisfaction, to that romantic ennui that seems to be all over Anderson's work.
Everyone's against me.
That's your fault, man.
Yeah, I know, but damn it, I want this family to love me.
Nowhere is this more evident than in the royal Tenenbaums, where the entire family has been, since the very beginning, longing for some sort of recognition, both from the outside world and from inside of their own home. They want to appear to be the perfect family with the 3 genius children, but they don't really know how to be a family in the first place. The romantic expectations of prestige and success crush them all in different ways, reducing them to constant longing.
I always wanted to be a Tenenbaum, you know?
Me too.
Because it doesn't mean what it used to, though, does it?
As Kent Jones wrote for the Criterion Collection, and it's about a different kind of longing too, to restore a family that was never that happy in the first place to an eminence that there never was. Anderson is tackling a difficult, sad, and sadly familiar dynamic here, a loving but fundamentally inattentive matriarch, a long-gone father who hides behind layers of guff and nonsense from Western dime novels, and 3 overgrown children with nothing but the memory of their own glory days for company. They've each built their own genius-stricken identity in a failed effort to define themselves outside of their unfathomable but inescapable family. If you take a closer look at them, beyond all the whimsy and the color, you can find that Wes Anderson's movies are, at their very heart, about just how lonely it can be to be alive.
Hey, are you okay?
I'm a little bit lonely these days.
And some people who are only tangentially familiar with his work might say that this sounds like it contrasts with his storybook style and his quirky storytelling. But does it really? Or could this be just one more way in which he communicates this loneliness? Some tea. I need some tea. Ugh, I'm so sad. Like a prominent YouTuber already claimed like holding a cup of tea during the video as theirs. It's like, it's kind of genius actually. Let's check back in with our own protagonist, shall we? Sir, how are you feeling?
Listless. Lonely. But in a way that looks really good.
Wonderful. Now let's take a look at one of his most interesting protagonists as an example. 1932, the fictional Central European nation of Dubrovka, Monsieur Gustav H. is the concierge of the renowned Grand Budapest Hotel, and he's quite a big part of why it is of such high regard in the first place. The man basically runs the place like it's the Navy, ensuring the absolute best customer service and often providing it himself.
That's all for now. I began to realize that many of the hotel's most valued and distinguished guests came for him.
His sole objective seems to be to run this perfectly precise world in a way that does the institution justice. He supervises every staff member with incredible attention to detail, curating a flawless experience through his charm, his good taste, and, most importantly, his romance. And I don't just mean him romancing the elderly guests, which he does. A lot.
Rudeness is merely the expression of fear. People fear they won't get what they want. The most dreadful and unattractive person only needs to be loved, and they will open up like a flower. I'm reminded of a verse. The painter's brush touched the inchoate face by ends of nimble...
Yes, the romance is, in fact, key, since it's what seems to guide his day-to-day operations. He recites poetry every night to guide the staff through their jobs. He spots, kindles, and nurtures young love in others, and he curates every aspect of the hotel to evoke the grandeur and panache of old, cementing himself as one of the last keepers of decency and taste, All with pretentiousness and superiority, sure, but also with plenty of sincerity and affection.
You see, there are still faint glimmers of civilization left in this barbaric slaughterhouse that was once known as humanity. Indeed, that's what we provide in our own modest, humble, insignificant... Oh, fuck it.
However, at the end of the day, he returns to his humble hotel quarters, exactly the same as those of his peers, all by himself. In terms of emotional connections, he really only has the occasional company of enamored guests, none of whom stay for long periods of time, and he arguably doesn't let them get that close to him either. He's not rich like the guests, but he's sophisticated, unlike the staff, so he remains in a lonely limbo in between. Monsieur Gustave keeps the perfect little world of his hotel running like clockwork because, well, that is all he has. It's his lonely duty to keep that splendor from vanishing, so that it can continue to keep him company.
It seemed to be an essential part of his duties, but I believe it was also his pleasure.
Richard Brody wrote for The New Yorker that, perhaps more than ever, Anderson takes a joyful yet aching delight in recreating the styles of bygone days. The hotel is like a majestically confected cake on the outside and a jewel box on the inside, adorned with staff and guests whose uniforms and fashions are nuanced to the buttons and whose behavior is self-controlled to the glance. Yet also, more than in any of his other films, that very recreation is his subject. The Grand Budapest Hotel is about the spiritual heritage and the political force of those long-vanished styles, about the substance of style, not just the style of his old world characters, but also, crucially, Anderson's own. Monsieur Gustave finally meets his match when young Zissou Mustafa arrives. This young refugee from a war-torn Middle Eastern nation has no family, no country, and no belongings.
Well, you see, my father was murdered, and the rest of my family were executed by firing squad. Our village was burned to the ground, and those who managed to survive were forced to flee. I left because of the war.
Yet he's followed its reputation all the way to the Grand Budapest Hotel in order to become a lobby boy.
Why do you want to be a lobby boy?
Well, who wouldn't? At the Grand Budapest, sir. It's an institution.
Very good.
In spite of being dirt poor and uneducated, Zissou has an unwavering interest in joining Monsieur Gustave's world, in contributing to it, in becoming part of it. He follows in on the poetry, the art, the good taste, and the romance of it all.
Then there's a poem, but we might want to go ahead and start in the soup since it's 46 stanzas. A moist black ash dampens the filth of a dumb dark rat's nest.
He's his companion in the ensuing adventure, which shows that, in the end, the attention to detail and care for others that Monsieur Gustave built into the hotel, as well as a series of different people who cared for him in return, have earned him the world he deserved. However, this is all overshadowed by the imminent threat of war and fascism, both of which linger over the hotel, over Subrovka, and over the whole world. After all, it's Europe in the 30s, and although the country isn't real, the outbreak of the war is too early, and this isn't a swastika, it's very clear that they're all evoking a very real history. This allows Anderson to borrow context without having to limit his statement to a specific time and place. As Brody writes, Anderson's intentions are apparent: to create a historical model that filters out specifics in order to consider in isolation, as in a scientific experiment, essential yet unfamiliar elements of the times, and to show their enduring force in the present day. The story's nested historical framework isn't just a telescope to provide perspective on distant times. It's also a mirror to reflect their lessons ahead to us. The Grand Budapest Hotel is hence a reminder that it has always been an unfortunate reality that art, beauty, and romance, our only medicine for solitude and the only real reasons to be alive, have always been under consistent threat by the powers that be.
The beginning of the end of the end of the beginning has begun. The sad finale played off-key on a broken-down saloon piano in the outskirts of a forgotten ghost town. I'd rather not bear witness to such blasphemy.
Me neither.
Why? because that same beauty threatens power right back. Welcome to the revolution. The French Dispatch follows a group of American journalists residing in the fictional French town of Ennui-sans-Blaze, which is French for boredom unindifferent. The reporters cover different local stories for a New Yorker-type publication back in Kansas, and we are treated to 4 different articles from 4 different reporters, which make up the final issue of the magazine following the founder and editor's death. They're each as wildly different from each other as the reporters are, and the articles are as much about the subjects as they are about the writers. After all, they all inadvertently capture a moment of connection between them and the locals, betraying and revealing their own desires and afflictions.
Why are you crying?
Tear gas. Also, I suppose I'm sad.
In the cycling reporter of the local color section, reporter Herben Sazerac confidently writes himself as both observer and participant in the city's daily life and history as one thread in an intricate collective narrative. In the Arts and Artists section, we have The Concrete Masterpiece, a biographic profile of an artist as written by J.K.L. Berenson, who mostly removes herself from the story, relegating herself to an ostensibly omniscient, though still inevitably subjective narrator. Revisions to a manifesto of the Politics Poetry section is told through journalistic integrity by Lucinda Crements, a reporter covering the local student protests. Though present throughout, deeply involved with her subject and the surrounding event, Crements pretends to be merely in the sidelines, and in doing so, ends up exposing the real person behind the typewriter.
Elle devrait maintenir une neutralité journalistique.
Mais n'importe quoi.
La neutralité journalistique est un concept désuet.
Ça n'existe pas.
Lastly, we have the Tastes and Smells section, with the private dining room of the police commissioner. Here, food journalist Roebuck Wright chronicles the night he was served by the police commissioner's cook, but very little of it ends up being about the food. Instead, it becomes a heartbreaking story about Roebuck himself and the emotional toll of the foreigner, the expatriate, the immigrant. It was then that it hit me that the connecting thread between these vignettes wasn't just the reporter revealing themselves through their writing. It was the condition of foreigner. That's what the French Dispatch, the in-universe publication, is all about after all. They tell us from the very start.
Over the next 10 years, he assembled a team of the best expatriate journalists of his time and transformed Picnic into the French Dispatch. He brought the world to Kansas.
Every segment either covers or is narrated by a foreigner who is struggling to find their place in this new home of theirs. The last one does both. Moses Rosenthaler, the artist profiled in The Concrete Masterpiece, is trying to poison himself to death in this foreign prison when, suddenly, he finds both purpose and company in Simone, one of the guards.
Well done, Moses. This has a greatness to it. If you plastered it deep enough, it may last. We'll come and see it again one day, God willing. You'll already still be here, of course.
It's all Simone.
And although the sadness in the writer is only revealed outside of the story, once she admits her and the artist were lovers 20 years prior, it's quite evident from the beginning of the next segment, Revisions to a Manifesto.
Maybe you're sad, but you don't seem lonely to me.
Exactly.
Lucinda Crements, while covering the student protests, begins an affair with Sefirelli, their young revolutionary leader. The relationship seems to stem from his need for more mature intellectual stimulation, she's revising his manifesto after all, and her need to return to that immature, idealistic youth, albeit from the sidelines.
You finished my manifesto without me.
I made it sound like you, I think. Just more clear, more concise, a bit less poetic. Put it this way. This isn't the first manifesto I've proofread.
The protests in this segment are all very reminiscent of May of '68. My cat is doing that. These protests are all very reminiscent of May of '68, in which students took to the streets of Paris to protest capitalism and imperialism. This spontaneous movement led to violent police repression, a countrywide solidarity strike, and, in the end, tangible legislative improvements for French workers and the general population. Similarly to other social movements of the time, it was also characterized by all sorts of different protest art, evoking film, art, and music that embodied the revolutionary values, and that youthful art-crazed romance is more than present in Zeffirelli and his other lover Juliet, a poetic revolution in which everything, even change, feels possible.
Poetic, not necessarily in a bad way.
Postscript to a burst appendix. An invincible comet speeds on its guided arc toward the outer reaches of the galaxy in cosmic spacetime. What was our cause?
There it is, the wild, never-ending world of the young, in which music kills fascists and movies move masses and students beat policemen, a fantasy that Lucinda, heartbroken, brings back down to the ground.
He is not an invincible comet speeding on its guided arc toward the outer reaches of the galaxy in cosmic space-time. Rather, he is a boy who will die young. His likeness, mass-produced and shrink-wrap packaged, will be sold like bubblegum to the hero-inspired, who hope to see themselves like this. The touching narcissism of the young.
It's all somewhat reminiscent of the tragedy behind Moonrise Kingdom, that the world is hostile to youthful ideas.
We're in love. You just want to be together. What's wrong with that?
But to come of age is to renounce reckless romance and unlimited inspiration. The established world of the adult has no room for that kind of ambitious innocence.
We're all they've got, Walt.
It's not enough.
So what is the point, in the end, of all that art and beauty, if not to change the world? Will the revolution not be poetic?
You've written about the American Negro, the French intellectual, the Southern romantic.
And the anti-Negro.
The anti-Negro. But more than anything, over all these years, you've written about food. Why?
In the last segment, writer Roebuck Wright is asked why, amidst all the important subjects he's dabbled in, he chooses to write, above all, about food. Reluctantly, he answers.
There is a particular sad beauty, well known to the companionless foreigner as he walks the streets of his adopted, preferably moonlit city, in my case, Ennui, France. I have so often shared the day's glittering discoveries with no one at all. But always, somewhere along the avenue or the boulevard, there was a table set for me. A cook, a waiter, a bottle, a glass, a fire. I chose this life. It is the solitary feast that has been very much like a comrade, my great comfort and fortification.
I, too, have been that companionless foreigner in his adopted city, and indeed, it was always food that kept me company, that kept me going not just biologically, but emotionally. Food was there for me when no one else was. That was the moment in which I understood that the French Dispatch was a way to explore that typical Anderson loneliness through the lens of the expatriate. It's about the foreigner's unquenchable desire to participate in their new home and be more than a mere observer. About the refuge from the solitude of these alien lands that we find in both food and art.
I'm a foreigner, you know. The city's full of us, isn't it? I'm one myself.
And each other, of course. Nescaffier and Roebuck don't just find this solace in food in order to get by, they do so to fit in, to survive, to live. Which is why that tiny little moment of solidarity between them is so special. Those are the brief connections that come to mean the world to us as foreigners. It seals the story and the whole movie as an immigrant's love letter to a little pocket of life they create in their new home.
Seeking something missing. Missing something left behind. Maybe with good luck, we'll find what eluded us in the places we once called home.
As we see here, art, food, beauty, they can be, and they should be, a vehicle to life, to community, to connection, to each other, to revolution. Not only do they populate the world with reasons to live, but they encourage you to go out and find more. That's what Wes Anderson's movies are all about. Notice that we always run into a similar pattern. It's all an intricate world of clockwork precision and never-ending beauty, but one that can also be terribly lonely. Until suddenly, it's not.
It's a lonely life, isn't it?
Sometimes.
In the world of Wes Anderson, all we really have is beauty. And each other. And that's all we really need. It goes without saying that everyone is entitled to their own tastes and opinions, so it's understandable that some people are just unable to get into the stylings of Wes Anderson. What I cannot abide is dismissing him as fluff, predictable, boring, or superficial, let alone a style over substance. Baby, you want to be in the shot? Well, you are. It's of this essayist's opinion that in good filmmaking, the style is always part of the substance, and I'm certain that Wes knows how to handle his filmmaking. After all, his work has managed to capture the imagination of not just cinephiles, but more casual audiences as well. And this public isn't there just for the pretty visuals, the dazzling set pieces, or even the all-star casts. The style is so well orchestrated to deliver the substance, it all adds up to a desire to be a part of that world, even if briefly, and despite the melancholy. And I think that's because we, the viewers, are allowed to decipher those bittersweet feelings along with the characters. We aren't told, or even shown, how the characters feel most of the time. We simply arrive to the emotions along with them. As Kent Jones wrote for Criterion, his oeuvre provides an object lesson in just how degraded film viewing habits have become from too much TV and blockbusterism. How movies and sitcoms have primed us to wait for the underlining of emotions before we allow ourselves to intuit them. And this might resonate with so many of us, because it feels much more real than the more linear and direct epiphanies of character development that we so often see in media. The Wes Anderson catharsis is messy, uneven, even almost accidental. Jones put it best when he said that Anderson has mastered the form, making winning, warm movies about angry, dissociated people who never consciously arrive at reconciliation, but always stumble into it on their endless quests to recover what they've lost. It's the promise of an emotional breakthrough, of an answer to the seemingly innate condition of solitude and disillusion.
I think we're just gonna have to be secretly in love with each other and leave it at that, Richie.
Perhaps that is why Anderson purposefully blurs the lines between reality and fiction so often. In the Grand Budapest Hotel, for example, we are witnessing the story of a man as told by his right-hand man to an author, then captured by a filmmaker, inspired by the stories of a different writer. It speaks to how influences all mesh together and influence each other in return. It's a lot, but it's beautiful and it's earnest and it's comforting. Because that's the real life cycle of these movies. They're art about people who find solace in art, hopefully providing solace to us in the process. Metatextually, we find a man creating weird, lonely worlds, populated by weird, lonely people, struggling to make sense of the weird, lonely world around them.
I wonder if it remembers me.
Does he himself, as creator, understand them? Or does creating new worlds of one's own allow for the illusion of understanding the real one? In the end, Monsieur Gustave was able to gain access to his dream world, albeit briefly.
What happened in the end? In the end, they shot him.
The glory days represented by Monsieur Gustave, and of course, the entire Grand Budapest Hotel, are brought to an abrupt, violent end.
Is it simply your last connection to that vanished world? His world, if you will.
His world? No, I don't think so.
Did this world, as presumably glorious, actually exist? Is this romantic decadence Monsieur Gustave, Steve Zissou, Margot Tenenbaum, and company all embodied as perfect as it seemed? Is all this carefully recreated grandeur of old worth it, when experiences such as Zeros and Robux expose it all as flawed, limited, and even deceiving?
To be frank, I think his world had vanished long before he ever entered it. But I will say, he certainly sustained the illusion with a marvelous grace.
At least we have stories. We have these stories. Stories that remind us that yes, solitude is everywhere. But then again, so is life. I realized that the only Wes Anderson movie that I don't mention at all in the script is Isle of Dogs. And, like, not that I miss it. This is a cat household anyway. Hey.